Radhe Radhe. Today is Saturday, 4th March 2023. We're here to record this recap video for our continuing Bhagavad Gita study series journey in chapter 7. So along with me here is Mummy.
Radhe Radhe.
And bringing up the screen, we covered today chapter 7, verses 3 and 4. Always first started off with a quiz to cover chapter 7, verses 1 and 2 from the previous session, and then on to chapter 7, verse 3. We'll listen to the recitation first, and then have a little bit of explanation.
Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam veti tattvataha.
So looking at chapter 7, verse 3, the catchphrase here is infinitesimal. So going back to the slide, infinitesimal, we mentioned, reminder hopefully to at least a few people back in the days of calculus, perhaps in mathematics. Again, really representing here in Sri Krishna's own words, how tiny the chances or the proportion is of being able to go even beyond perfection, to know Sri Krishna completely in truth. In fact, there are three tiny fractions perhaps that are implied here, and Swamiji very aptly mentions in the commentary that yes, small proportion of people strive for perfection, and an even smaller fraction of that know Sri Krishna in truth. But even to get to the person stage, that involves a very tiny proportion. So amongst thousands of persons, to get that human form in the first place, we've seen this many times in previous chapters, 8.4 million species, 84 lakh. Of those, 400,000 approximately are human form species. So just less than 5% chance, even within the forms, to get the ability to be a human again. And then of that, to strive towards perfection, and then to go towards God realization. Very, very tiny, infinitesimal indeed are the chances. Sri Krishna himself says that. The key word Swamiji brings out in the commentary that we discussed is siddhi, which is used here for perfection on the spiritual path. There are many definitions Swamiji describes. We also mentioned that siddhi comes up, for instance, many of you will recognize in the Hanuman Chalisa, Ashta Siddhi No Nidhi Ke Data. So 8 siddhis describing Hanuman and all his powers of perfection. Swamiji again reminds us that the key element beyond perfection, beyond siddhi, to know God in full truth is the loving devotion element. We saw that through a quiz question today, so please do go back to the quiz questions as well and practice. And we saw this at the end of chapter 6. Of all the yogis, the highest is the one that is practicing bhakti yoga. So bhakti, the element of surrender and complete prem and love for God, doing everything for the pleasure and enjoyment of God. That is key to be able to move ahead from perfection to complete knowledge of God. With God's grace, in fact, God realization. So that is the important set of takeaways for this one. And Swamiji again concludes by saying that if one doesn't practice anything beyond theoretical knowledge, so as we said in class, if you practice Gyan, you learn a lot of Gyan, but you don't take it to devotion along with your sadhana, there will not be that experiential wisdom, Vignan, part of the Sanskrit title of chapter 7. You won't have that Vignan, we won't have that, which will get us to that absolute truth. So this is something that is extremely relevant. Quick connection to chapter 2, verse 29 is a reminder way back in chapter 2 from, in fact, I think the Kathopanishad, I believe, yeah, that even to get a guru is so rare. So think about all the combinations that are needed for even striving on this perfection route, the spiritual path of perfection. So a teacher who is self-realized is very rare. The opportunity for all of us to benefit from Swamiji's and Maharajji's lectures and videos, that is even rarer. And then really to not be discouraged as a teacher or as a student going along that path. All that takes, of course, a lot of grace, but the chances are low. And back here in chapter 7, verse 3, as Sri Krishna says, even to know God, all that requires, a lot of grace, and the chances of all that happening are very, very tiny. We'll next move on to chapter 7, verse 4.
Bhumirapo nalo vayuhu kham mano buddhireva cha ahankar iti yam me bhinna prakritir ashtadha.
So chapter 7, verse 4, here we are talking about 8 components of Sri Krishna's material energy. Prakriti, which is a term that we have seen before and in previous chapters and discussions, as also the 5 gross elements. So earth, more subtle than that, water, even subtler is fire, above that is air, even subtler than that is space. So these are the 5 gross elements, as Mummy reminded us in class. We saw them way back in chapter 2, in fact, chapter 2, verse 28, when we were introduced to the concept of the gross body and then the subtle body. So these 5 gross elements, and along with them, mind, intellect, and ego. These are the 8 components, or the bhinna, the divisions of Sri Krishna's material energy. So Swamiji has given a very good explanation here that we discussed in class, and as a reminder as well, we shared links to Swamiji's videos with each set of slides. So if you go a couple of slides down, you'll see one of the links is going to be to a video where Swamiji again expands upon the commentary for chapter 4, verse 7. There's also a much shorter 1-minute clip approximately that also illustrates the same concept. Very briefly, we've learned in physics and or chemistry back in the day in our school years, the 118 elements at this time in the periodic table, the concepts that Swamiji mentioned about Einstein. We talked about the brief progression of this evolution of, science, mass energy equivalence, quantum theory, etc. But I also mentioned that to get to unified field theory, we don't yet have a complete understanding of where gravitation fits in terms of connecting field forces and particles. All that said, Swamiji says that indeed we have a perfect version of unified field theory from Sri Krishna himself. And more than 5,000 years ago, when the Bhagavad Gita was spoken to Arjun, and in fact, timeless eternal wisdom way back as early as when Vivaswan, the sun god, got that same set of instructions from Sri Krishna. In essence, when God decides that he wants to create the entire universe and world, he just glances at it. So there's material energy, Prakriti, that already exists. Sri Krishna glances at it, and then these components unfold. There's Mahan. Essentially, as Swamiji says, there's no English or science term or word for it. Science hasn't reached that stage of evolution yet. But very briefly, it refers to how we then get the existence of the mind and the intellect. And then with that, of course, there's going to be this element of ego, this false identification of ourselves as the body and not the soul. So naturally, after Mahan, the thing that unfolds is ahankar. And then after that, we have the Panch Tanmatras. We saw those, the 5 perceptions, taste, touch, smell, sight, and sound. And then we get to those 5 gross elements, the remaining part of the 8 components of material energy. So from most subtle to least subtle, space, air, fire, water, and earth. All that helps us briefly understand as this chapter 7 journey unfolds. Next time, in fact, we'll talk about how Sri Krishna describes the soul energy or the superior energy. But for now, we've learned today in chapter 7, verse 4, that these 8 components are as we just described. Mummy, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Gagan. Very well explained. For me, the essence of these 2 verses is basically bhakti. Bhakti, bhakti, and bhakti. And a very beautiful phrase which is very close to my heart, that is loving devotion to God. That is what Krishna is basically teaching us, that you do gain this knowledge. Theoretical knowledge is also important, but now how do you experience that real wisdom, that God realization that will happen through bhakti. Bhakti means through sadhana. Sadhana and seva. These are the two. When we used to learn in school something theory, then we would do practical also. So here the practical is that tomorrow you join us for Radha Krishna temple Sunday satsang, where we are going to, the volunteers are going to depict the beautiful flower holi with Krishna. Join us for that, and that experience will take, that sadhana will take you to this experiential knowledge, whereby there will be at least one moment where your mind will be totally connected with God, and that is the real purpose that Krishna is teaching us. So then let's learn two words also. From verse number 3, the word siddhaye. Siddhaye means for perfection, and another word is yatatam. Yatatam means the one who strives for perfection. So these two words are very important. And in verse number 4, the 5 words we have to learn, which are very important. Many people, Hindi speaking, they may be knowing it. So bhumi, that means earth. Apaha means water. Analaha means fire. Vayuhu means air. And kham means space. So these are the, what are these? These are the 5 gross elements that God has given us in this universe. And of course, Gagan talked about the subtle energies, God's distinctive elements of God's energy. And through that, we are given an opportunity in this human form to move on the path of bhakti and have loving devotion for God, so that we can have another step towards God realization. Hope that helps to understand.
Yes, thank you, Mummy. And just final set of comments going back to the slide. I purposely skipped the catchphrase here. So Nobel Prize is a question I mentioned in class, of course, about that. But again, Nobel, Nobel, that's where, of course, that's what Einstein and other great people got. Here, I'm really talking about noble causes, and no greater than, of course, God himself. That's a little bit that we can, of course, offer in our mind indeed. And of course, that was also a very great segue. Wanted to again thank Dale for her contribution and very, very kind words that she mentioned in connection with Swamiji's noble causes and project. So she and Bilji made a nice contribution to our walk page, all going towards Swamiji's noble cause. And as a reminder, every time when we send the slides, there is this page here, which has links. Both these links are the same. You can click on the picture or click on the link directly. These will take you to the walk page setup as part of this entire Give Get campaign, where we are just doing our tiny bits that we can towards Swamiji's extremely noble causes and endeavors. As we've mentioned many, many times, no contribution is too small. So please open up your hearts if you're able to at any point in time. All that will go towards healthcare and education in rural Orissa. Everything towards JKYog, towards Swamiji's mission, all these noble projects. And of course, as we mentioned in class, when we mentioned, Dilji said as well, all matched dollar for dollar, up to very, very large amounts by the Nanda Foundation. So again, we do appreciate the contributions and of course, the heartfelt thoughts there. Final comment, we will presumably meet next week as well, of course. So that's going to be Saturday, 11th March, 2023. And just to get us in the spirit for a few seconds,
सावरिया खेले होली बरसाने में सावरिया खेले होली बरसाने में.
So just a tiny segment of the very, very catchy song that Hari Anandji and Swamiji and all had for Holi. We do hope you can check that out, but of course, get in the spirit. Holi is coming up in just a few days. And of course, we do hope you can join, as Mummy said, tomorrow at the Radha Krishna Temple of Dallas in person or online. The Fulon Ki Holi, the flowers-based Holi celebration along with the satsang celebrations. And of course, then next week, we'll have class, same time, same place. And for those in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, hope to see you, of course, at the in-person grand holy celebrations where Hari Anandji himself will be there. Plenty in store. And so with that, we look forward to continuing that journey together. Thank you so much. Radhe Radhe.
Yeah. Radhe Radhe, wishing everybody a very happy Holi, which is coming on 7th and 8th of March. And enjoy the colors of loving devotion of God. Radhe Radhe. Thank you.